Welcome back to the Eric Metaxas Show. Do you remember what I told you in the previous segment? Do you remember promises made, promises kept? You heard me. Candace Owens is my guest, and you get to listen to her. I get to listen to her too. Candace Owens, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me. It's been way too long. I know you've invited me a few times, so I apologize, and I'm glad to be on now.
I know you're playing hard to get, and I hate that about you. I want to be upfront. Now, you know what I wanted to talk to you about? A lot of people know you in a number of different contexts. You were affiliated with Turning Point for a while. You are the founder of the Blexit movement. Blexit, why don't you explain that to my white audience?
Yes, so Blexit stands for the Black Exit, and really it's calling for a Black exit amongst Black Americans from the progressive principles that have never served us and continue to not serve us. In fact, progressive principles have largely deteriorated the Black American family and Black American values over time, certainly in terms of the economics. So it really is, I consider Blexit to be a re-education camp. You're finding in schools more and more that people aren't learning. They're being brainwashed and they're being told what to think, not how to think. And largely, progressives have been able to systematically wipe their own history in terms of the policies that they put in place to harm Black Americans, in terms of what the mentality was in shaping and informing those policies. Case in point, abortion, which was about eugenics and about making sure that Black people could not reproduce. So it's really about really introducing Black Americans to their history so that we can better our futures.
Okay, so you're the founder of the Blexit movement. Now, the only thing I don't like about the Blexit movement, and I'll be perfectly honest with you, I don't get to join that movement. I resent you for that. That's racialist. I don't know.
It's not true. You can join because... Yeah, you can, because the truth is that there's never been any progress in this country for Black Americans without white conservative allies. We could not have done
the kind of Uncle Tom thing I knew you were going to say. Yeah. Okay, so you know that I love you. I've watched you do your thing in so many different venues. So my love language is stupid jokes, so you'll forgive me in advance. But I want to say that I know it has been bruited about that you are running for office. You had tweeted about that. Now, I grew up in Connecticut, so I'm sort of hoping you'll run for governor of Connecticut or something like that. What are you thinking, or can you even talk about that?
It's on the table. I can say that I am looking at Connecticut. I'm looking at Virginia. I'm wondering, do I want to go for a Senate seat? I'm not as interested in the House. I know there are a lot of people that want me to run against AOC, but I'm less interested in the House. And I might just say no to all of it and run for president in 2024. Everything's on the table.
Listen, you're way too young to need to waste your life by running for presidency that early. You need to build up to it slowly. Okay. Yeah. I'm gonna advise you. And I'm gonna have a conversation with you offline, because you're too valuable to leap there. But okay, look, have you come prepared to talk about current events?
I'm always prepared to talk about.
That was a joke. That was a joke, Candace. Of course, you are more prepared than I'm prepared. Let's jump in before we get into bigger stuff. Right now, we are in a bizarre moment in our country, utterly unprecedented. What are you thinking about where we are right now and opening up the country and how we should do it and how the president's doing and all that stuff?
Well, first and foremost, I'm one of the people that believes that we should have never closed the country. It runs counter to freedom, and it runs counter to what we believe in. Our government's job is not to keep every person alive. Our government's job is to inform us of threats and to provide a defense system for us overseas. But we did not sign up for the deal of the government is now responsible to make sure every single person lives. And I'm a big believer in free market solutions to everything. And I believe that if people were terrified, they should have had the option to stay home and should have the option to stay home. We're fortunate now and blessed that staying home does not mean you're going to starve to death. Everything is online now. You can get everything to your door. You can get your groceries to your door. So shutting down, meaning allowing people to make the personal decision to shut their lives down because they were so fearful, and also allowing people that were not afraid to go out and run their businesses if they wanted to, would have been, in my opinion, the wisest decision, because we wouldn't have had to look to Congress to welfareize half of the society. So I was against the stimulus. I was against shutting shutting down society. I think it's a scary precedent to set. Of course, I support the president, so there's no fear. And you hear a lot of conservatives say, "Oh, the president would never take advantage of these policies." But the president is not going to be president forever, and it's a very dangerous precedent to set, to give that much power to our federal government to shut down everything. What if it was a President Bernie Sanders? Would you be saying the same thing? Those are the questions that people should be asking themselves.
I had Diana West on the program the other day, and she also said that she thought the president had fallen for the trap by shutting down the government. It's the first time I heard someone say that. But if you believe in the free market, or really if you believe in freedom as we do, then you do think along those lines. You start thinking that, look, smoking is bad for you, but I don't know that I want to make it illegal. There's things that I can do, but if you choose to be stupid, it's a free country. You can say stupid things, you can believe stupid things, and you can do stupid things to an extent. Obviously, when you're talking about a pandemic, I think they were freaking out because they didn't know how it spread, and they thought maybe if we shut the country down. But you're quite right that something happens, and because we haven't been educated well in the last 40 or 50 years on these principles, a lot of people just sort of fell for it. They kind of fell in line in a way that I would think Americans of previous generations would not have done.
Right, and that's true, and there has been sort of the coddling of this generation, meaning that we are a generation that doesn't know anything. When I say this generation, I'm talking about millennials and below. We've never had a war fought on our soil. We haven't lived through a war. We weren't the people that ended World War I or World War II. So our idea of devastation is finding out that we're not going to live beyond 86. And as we have this culture of people that, Botox culture, how can we be younger? How can we live forever? It was the easiest fear for people to tap into. And when I say people to tap into, I'm talking about people that want to proliferate socialist policies by telling a bunch of people that are largely narcissistic that there's a possibility they can die. And everyone was ready to go, oh my God, that's the worst thing in the world. You go a couple of generations ago, they were lucky if they could live beyond childhood, right? You people that were dying giving in childbirth. And so they were much more tethered to the concept of death, I think. So that's kind of the unfortunate thing about modernity and us progressing to this point in society where we're so privileged, and this is what we're dealing with today.
Other than me, you're the only person I've heard talk about this way, because my parents suffered through World War II in Europe. They knew what it was to be hungry, to see people killed. Most people beyond my generation, because I would completely include the boomers in this, have never seen what's weird about the last 60 years, anybody who's like 65 and younger, is that we've never seen what every other generation has seen, which is a kind of existential threat, death everywhere. We've had this odd bubble of prosperity. And so you're right, we've kind of become addicted to safety, and we are all too willing to say to the government, can you help me? Can you help me? Can you help me? Because we forgot that we can actually take care of ourselves.
Right. We can make our own decisions as long as they're giving us the facts. And the government, and what's crazy about this is the government knew nothing. And that's part of it. They didn't know anything. They just were making policies every single day and extending those policies and making them more severe. And they had zero empirical data to back up why they were informing these policies. And people just fell for it because they were fearful. And that is why the only thing to fear is fear itself, right? Because people have fallen for this trap, and it's an economic disaster that we're just digging ourselves further into the hole. There are people that are now able to make the decision, giving just an example here, to quit their jobs because it makes more sense for them, because they will get more money in unemployment than they will in terms of how they're working. Now, that is $1 a day, $1 today, and not $1 tomorrow, of course, because eventually they'll quit their jobs, that check will dry out, and suddenly they'll be a part of people that don't have a job to go back to, because there's not going to be as many jobs to go back to. So this is sort of the way that I think a little further down the line, and realizing that right now what we're really seeing play out is a war between socialism and communism, and capitalism and free markets, and I am an unapologetic free market person.
Well, I was sort of having a conversation / debate with David French yesterday in Nashville at the Q conference, and I basically said we need to put the message out that socialism F's the poor, or whatever strong message, to understand, like, you need to understand, if you hate the poor, go for socialism. Mm-hmm. Unless you understand how viciously it attacks poor people, you have no business talking about it. We have to get the message out that these things are not they're not even slightly helpful. If you want to destroy a generation of people, this is how to do it. Socialism is how to do it. We're going to go to a break. Candace, when we come back, I want to get your response to some people have been saying that this president was incompetent in dealing with this COVID virus initially, and because of him, we are where we are. When we come back, we're going to hear from you on that. Folks, I'm talking to Candace Owens. Why would you go away? Yeah. Hey folks, lucky me and lucky you. I'm talking to Candace Owens. Candace, listen, you are you're a resident at this point of like the DC area, but you grew up in Connecticut. Later on, I want to talk to you about like running for office in Connecticut, where they need actual Americans to run for office, because the current governor, I don't know what his ideology is. But let me just ask you, competence. A lot of people, and it grieves me deeply because they're at least mostly wrong, have accused the president of incompetence of all things in dealing with this virus initially. How do you respond to that?
Well, I would challenge, and I would ask those people that are saying that, when have they ever accused him of being incompetent? This is more or less the same coronavirus, just the next topic that they get to blame the president for being incompetent on. They've never given him credit for anything. They didn't give him credit when the economy was, just rolling upward, and we were hitting stock market highs every single day. They still said, well, that's because of Obama. So this is the same class of people that say no matter what he does, it's incompetent unless he transforms himself into a Democrat and signs up for socialism. So it's nonsense that should be ignored and shouldn't be, we shouldn't even attempt to justify it or intellectualize it, because there's nothing intellectual behind it. It's just hate. That's a feeling.
We're in a horrible war. We're in a culture war, as you know, and I normally wouldn't have used those terms, but we've come to a place now where the New York Times, for example, above the fold, sides with Red China and says that Trump is scapegoating, that was their verb, above the fold, scapegoating China, to improve his political fortunes for the fall, as though China is not, to say to blame. The only question is, how evil and nefarious have they been exactly? We don't know yet exactly, but we know they've been evil and nefarious. But the press, you've seen this and I've seen this, they have stooped to a level we've never seen anything like it in our lifetimes. What do you make of this idea that we have a president willing to take on the tough issues, nonetheless being criticized at every turn?
Well, when I think about the mainstream press and the left-wing press, it's apparent to me that what they care about is their funding. These people are driven by money and they're driven by greed, and there's nothing else. And they're willing to subject America to potential communism and socialism, and they're trying to assist that. So there's no question as to why they side, with communist China, or why they're siding with people that you would think that they would stand up against. They're saying that AOC is a hero. They know that none of her economic decisions or thoughts or ideas are valid, and they know that if they were ever brought to the forefront, it would depress America. I guess they assume that they will be a part of the people that survive socialist reigns, and that is always the people that are the government and the press that supports the government, that writes the Pravda and the propaganda on behalf of the government, even when the country is starving and dying. So that's the position that they have taken, because they would be a part of the haves and not the have-nots if socialism was ever realized in this country. It's abhorrent. And it's scary because there are people that actually believe that these are non-biased journalists, and that they're just trying to do the most help. But we're talking about a group of people that are now saying that they want things to remain shut down because they care about the preservation of lives. But at the same time, these people are pro-abortion. They're okay with 800,000 plus Americans being killed in the womb. And they're also pro the fat acceptance movement and things of that nature, which is the biggest contributor to deaths in this country, even if COVID-19 fulfills its 66,000 prediction by August, people would still be primarily dying from being fat. So none of it makes any sense. It's all paradoxical, but it's all part of a larger, more nefarious plan.
Now, wait, go back to that, because I'm happily ignorant of a lot of the things with regard to this virus, just because I can't bear it anymore. So what you just said, you're saying that heavy people, by and large, have been dying from this? Like I'm not, I think I heard something along those lines, but help me
Yeah.
understand this.
So there's two things to look at. The first thing is that if the argument is that what they care about is the preservation of lives, right, then you have to look at various different topics. What would preserve the most lives in America? What is the number one killer in America, right? The number one killer in America is fat, being fat. It's 365,000 people die a year from fat-related heart disease. It's a bigger number for heart disease all around, but 365,000 Americans perish every year from being fat. And you see the left champions this fat acceptance movement. You know, it's shameful to not allow people to be fat. We got to put more fat people in the public. And they've also, at the same time, acknowledged that with COVID-19, if you are overweight, you are more likely to die from this disease. So they're talking talking from both sides of their mouths at this point in time, right? So they're claiming to care about the preservation of lives, but they don't care about the preservation of lives, or they would be necessarily on the side of conservatives who argue for pro-life stances. Obviously, we are necessarily against abortion, and we are necessarily not the purporters of believing that it's, you know, be as fat as you want and America needs to just like it and we need more fat people in the public space because this is okay. So it's what I'm really calling them out on is their astounding hypocrisy. This isn't about saving lives. This is about fulfilling, you know, what their political goals are, and their political goals are socialism.
And obviously they're using death to fearmonger, because what I find bizarre is we've always had death. We always have death. So it doesn't mean that we ignore the COVID virus, obviously not. But the idea that we can somehow wipe out death, and that, you know, in other words, as we're talking, people are dying of all kinds of things, and it's simply a part of our reality. So the question is, what do we do, you know, to help everybody? And there's all kinds of things to talk about. There's, you know, auto fatalities. There's every kind of death, and there's cancer, and what they're doing now, of course, is they're focusing things so narrowly on coronavirus deaths, as though other deaths don't count, or we never had death before this virus struck. So there is clearly fear mongering going on right now. We have to go to another break, folks. I'm talking to Candace Owens. Do not go away. Why would you? I know you won't. We'll be right back. Folks, it's the Eric Metaxas Show. I'm Eric Metaxas, but I have a guest today. Her name is Candace Owens, and she's in some kind of a bunker in Wyoming with Dick Cheney. I don't know. Nobody's telling me where they are anymore. Candace, welcome back.
Thank you.
Now, I know you're married. I don't know, have I seen you since you got married? You got married like, what, a year ago or something?
Yeah, I got married last August.
Last August. And because I remember that I emailed you on a certain day and said, hey, why don't you come on my show? And like later that day, I saw a tweet like, congratulations, like you had been married that day. So the fact that you didn't respond to me, I'm going to let it go. It's so hilarious to me that literally on the day, congratulations on getting married. I want to go back to the idea of running for office, because there are a lot of really tremendously competent individuals out there who choose not to run for office. They say, I'm better off writing books or being a pundit or doing this or doing that. But you have recently thought about this and mentioned it publicly. What caused you to begin to think about political office?
This pandemic, actually. I had never thought about running for office, but in these extraordinary times, you realize that how much people know, how experienced they are, how long they've been in office means nothing if they don't have courage. And there are a lot of conservatives that I respect who are not courageous. And you've realized this, and they're acquiescing to the left because they were fearful themselves of the possibility of catching a virus. And they were willing to sort of get on their knees with these socialist policies in the beginning. And now they're kind of trying to come to the other side and say, oh, well, we should slowly reopen. We can't have that, especially at such a critical time in our country. I asked myself this question: who do I think is a good candidate to follow Trump? Right? Trump was fearless when he went into office. He was fearless. He stood up against the entire mainstream media. He said things that had never been said before, and he's still standing there. Who do you think has that same personality and that courage that could do the same thing?
Other than us?
Other than Trump? Other than us? Yeah, I mean, it's really small. Yeah, it's really small.
You and me, I can't think of a soul. I'll be honest with you. Obviously,
people that have the credentials, but what are credentials if you don't have courage?
No, listen, no kidding. You know, I agree with you on this. This is the issue. And whenever people, like, remember when people said Hillary Clinton is the most qualified, blah, 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 I thought to myself, who ever determined what it is as what the qualifications are to be president. You're not running, you know, whatever, you know, to run a particular kind of company or something. I mean, to be the president of the United States takes many things. It's like, well, you know, who has the credentials to be Winston Churchill? I mean, it's not the kind of thing you put on a resume. It's got to be inside. And this president has really shown himself to be an unprecedented leader. I mean, it's an extraordinary thing to see him do the things he's doing. And to me, what he has done is he has forced most Americans, at least most conservative Americans, to see the horror of the incompetence and lack of courage of previous Republicans who have been unwilling to take on, for example, China. You want to talk about incompetence? Can you imagine allowing this stuff to go on for decades, from Clinton till today? And it took this maniac Donald Trump to face China and to take that on. Let's talk about China for a second.
Yeah, I mean, that is something that I totally agree with. I mean, we knew that they were stealing our intellectual property, that they were given, you know, a favorable side in terms of all the trade agreements, and it was allowed to go on. It was allowed to go on forever. And they were taking our jobs overseas. And as someone who's a business owner and someone who's looking to open, you know, I run 2 businesses, I'm looking to open a third. And honestly, the first thing I said is, how much is it going to cost to get me to make this product that I want to make in America versus if I get it done overseas. And here I find myself in this intellectual dilemma, because in this ideological dilemma rather, because I believe the jobs need to be home, but where are the incentives to bring the jobs home? So all of these things that Trump hit on and that he was willing to stand up and say no more, is something that I don't know many people would have had the courage to do, because it takes a willingness to be called a lot of names, the names that you know that you are not, right? Trump knows he's not a racist. He knows he's not anti-Semite and all these things that are called, but most people care so much about their image. Again, getting back to this underlying narcissism that is really has permeated our culture, that they're willing to say, okay, well, I'll just let them have that. I'll let them have that and have things keep going. Again, I know many people that are credentialed to become the president of the United States, and that means little to me in terms of who should become the president of the United States based on not only credentials, not only ideas, but a willingness to forge ahead and fight.
Well, again, I love the idea that you're thinking of running for office, because we do need people in public office who think the way that you do. It is an amazing thing, as I said, to look back and to think that the people that I considered, you know, good guys, whatever, were in many ways part of the problem. And I think that this president has put spine in many Republicans, not enough, but there is a cadre of Republicans right now who seem to have the guts that he does, or at least to approach it.
Right. I mean, I hope so. As I said, what I was looking at across the board, I found very few Republicans that were willing to stand up from the very beginning of this COVID-19 and hold on to the values that they espouse every single day, you know, believing in the freedom for Americans to make the decisions, and believing in free market economics as a solution to virtually everything. Everybody sort of became a socialist overnight, and that made me fearful. And like I said, I looked across the board, people that I followed, people that I idolized, and they were like, well, we should shut down for a little bit to see what happens. And it, in my opinion, it was not the right move. It just was not. Because he still could have had this shut down by saying, I advise, as a president of the United States, I advise that everybody stay home, but I'm not going to mandate that. And I'll tell you who did do that, and who I think is someone to look out for in the future of politics: Kristi Noem, the governor of South Dakota. She didn't shut down anything. And she stood on her ground, and she said that, you know, I gave people of South Dakota the information. It is not my right as a governor to force this shutdown on a bunch of people. I believe in freedom. And I do know her personally. You know, I went fishing on a fishing trip with her once, just randomly in a group of people. And that is, she stands on those morals and those principles. You can't decide that your morals and your principles only stand until you're afraid.
Well, see, this is what is so fascinating, is that I really think that for the first time in American history, we have a leadership class that does not understand these principles. I mean, if you went back to 1930, most Americans, whether instinctively or whether they could quote the founders, they understood what it meant to be an American. They understood freedom. They got these ideas and they lived them out. We really have a cultural elite class that definitely doesn't understand these things. We're going to go to a break, folks. I'm talking to Candace Owen. Don't go away. Hey folks, I want to recommend a new book to you that I've recently read entitled Reflections on the Existence of God by Richard E. Simmons. This book is a collection of short essays focusing on life's biggest questions. How did we get here? Where do we find meaning in life? Who determines what is evil? And does God even exist? This book is easy to read because it's divided into a series of brief essays, perfect for a devotional or discussion with a friend. I highly recommend that you add a copy of Reflections on the Existence of God to your pandemic reading list. Simmons also asks questions that speak directly to one of the most important things you possess, your worldview. Your worldview, as you know, is going to impact the way you live your life for better or for worse. If you want to challenge yourself to spiritual and intellectual growth, then be willing to ask yourself life's toughest questions. Dive in today and click below to order your copy of Reflections on the Existence of God right now. Reflections on the Existence of God. Check it out. Very important stuff. Folks, welcome to Hour 2 of the Eric Metaxas Show. We call it Hour 2 because it's legally mandated. It follows Hour 1. And, I like to color outside the lines, but I don't want to go to jail. So this is Hour 2. Okay, folks, I'm talking to Candace Owens, one of my favorite people. Candace, I'm just so grateful to you for making yourself available. I know you're in the middle of editing a book or something, obviously a book that you wrote. Do you dare share the title or the idea behind this book?
Yeah, so my book is called Blackout, and it is subtitled How Black America Can Make Its Second Escape from the Democrat Plantations. My thesis being that, if anything, what the Democrats have done was just modernize their same techniques that they used in the time that they had black slaves pulling all the work for them and at no benefit to themselves. And I really spell that out through various topics, the education system, and, black American slaves were not allowed to learn to read. When we were slaves, there was laws against it. Even if you were a white American during the time of slavery, if you were caught teaching a black person to read, you would be in equal amounts of trouble. And to today, where you have states like California, where 75% of black boys can't pass a basic literacy exam. The breakdown of family, the systemic breakdown of family, which was necessary to trading slaves, and the Democrat policies that have seen a larger breakdown in a black American family today than in the 1800s. It's astounding stuff. And I'm really just spelling out a thesis to, again, re-educate black Americans about their history, which has largely been buried by the academia, the left-wing academia, which really, they largely inform a lot of the stuff that we're learning in the education system, which is nothing. And really a call to action for all Americans to have the courage to stand up and to say no more to this.
Let me ask you, I guess when you know that this stuff is true, as you do, it's hard not to be angry and vocal about it, because I think most people cannot believe that it's true. Most people don't believe that it's true. That can't be true. It's too horrible. And yet we know that it is true. I think that one of the tremendous signs of hope that we have now is your voice, and equally shocking, the voice of Kanye West. I mean, who ever dreamt that Kanye West would not only think for himself, but talk about thinking for himself, talk about his Christian faith more boldly than any preacher I've ever heard, and talk about thinking for himself politically. I know you have some contact with him, or you have, but I mean, that is like a cultural earthquake to me. It's just a stunning thing.
Right. And in my opinion, all of that is God. God chooses the right people who are in various places to do certain things. And, God chose to have me go through a very tough life and through certain experiences, to start as a liberal and to come out conservative, because it just added weight to the things that I was saying. And they couldn't, wipe a brush and say, oh, well, she grew up wealthy, and like they tend to do to a lot of black Americans that get some sense about what's going on. For Kanye West, he couldn't have been in a better space, when so much of what has kept black Americans down is culture. A very bad culture, and a culture that is largely controlled by the left. And it's the reason why nobody in Hollywood, which is largely satanic in my opinion, is allowed to be a conservative without getting a pink slip. And so I really do believe that there is a spiritual element to all of that, and the timing of this at a time where we're at such a critical point in this country could only be something that was ordained by something bigger than all of us.
Well, I certainly agree with you. This is God. God is doing this. It's a cultural reset. I mean, nobody could have invented you except God. And boom, here you are, and you're speaking as you're speaking, and so many people are cheering you on. I actually think that the left is scared to death of you, of Kanye. It's like their worst nightmare that people like you, for many reasons, not just that you're black, but there's something about your personality, the way you talk. It's different than, you know, there has always been a smattering of black conservatives, but you speak with a fire, and Kanye does as well. And I'm really convinced that the Democrats are really freaked out at the whole Blexit movement.
Right. Absolutely they are. And, you know, for them, the difference, and I always talk about this between people like Kanye or people like me or people that seem to be, you know, having more success in waking Black Americans up. It's not an intellectual difference. There are people that are way smarter than us. Condoleezza Rice, Clarence Thomas, Thomas Sowell, Walter Williams. These are people that have really given me my education. But you know, what they lacked was an element of courage. And what I mean by that is that and I've spoken to Dr. Ben Carson about this, but these people are polite. And when somebody calls them an Uncle Tom or a coon, they don't engage. And I think for me, it's the exact opposite, where I rise to the challenge. You know, I won't be called, you call me Uncle Tom, I call you a slave. Right. And then they get angry because they've always had so much control where they could call people names and they never got it back. So part of that is really just giving it as good as you get it.
That's so interesting. I think that it has something to do with your age and Kanye's age. You know, that there are different generations that respond in different ways, but your willingness to fight back. I mean, obviously, this president has that. I just find it funny in a way, because when people are not used to that, I mean, when people talk about, you know, Trump causing whatever it is, a vulgarization of the cultural conversation or blah, 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 I realize, like, actually, no. If people had played nice with him, he would play nice. But when they attack him, he attacks back. And the fact of the matter is that when you call someone a racist, or when you say the things that they've said about him in the past, you know, George W. Bush or other people that I have admired, they would not fight back. They would think it's not the gentlemanly thing to do. But there is a time to fight. And to see people like you and this president willing to fight, and I don't mean fighting dirty, but I mean fighting in the way that we need to fight because we care about those who are suffering, like all the blacks in America who have been lied to. Something happens and you inspire others to fight. I mean, you have to know that you have inspired so many other men and women to fight because of your voice.
I hope so. And that's what I'm here for. My hope is that I inspire, you know, Black Americans to wake up and to stand up to this is cultural establishment that hasn't allowed us to say anything, to fight back. They call you a name, call them a name back. My hope is that I've given white Americans the courage to respond when somebody arbitrarily calls them a racist. You know, don't settle for that. He says, ask them more questions, ask them to justify that. That doesn't shut down a conversation. It actually should demand more conversation. I would never let somebody call me something that I'm not. And for too long, we've given into this culture of white guilt, which Shelby Steele does a great job. He has a book about that I read, tailing between your legs of how to be a white person, tailing between your legs of how to be a Black conservative, when really we need those people to become more dominant forces in culture.
Oh, I totally agree. I want to find out, you know, sort of, how did you get to be where you are? Where did you grow up? How were you raised? What's your story?
I talk about this a lot in my book, but I was raised in Connecticut, you know, first and foremost in a really small apartment, roach-infested apartment, with my parents and my two sisters and my brother, until my grandfather came along and came to our place and said, I don't want my grandbabies to grow up in this circumstance. And he moved us into his more middle-class home. My grandfather was raised on a sharecropping farm, you know, had dealt with a real KKK in North Carolina, Fayetteville is where he came up. And, you know, he had to lay tobacco out to dry since he was 5 years old in that sharecropping farm in a hot attic. And never in my entire life has my grandfather ever told me that I couldn't do something because of the color of my skin. He was a part of that generation that believed in hard work. He doesn't believe in calling white people racist. He believes it was a different time. And he instilled a lot of hardcore conservative values in me. We had to read the Bible every day when I was growing up around the table. And he had all of these rules, crazy rules to me at the time that I write about in my book. And he would incorporate us into his prayers when we did something wrong. I went through a phase once I moved out of his house, in rejecting that and feeling that conservatism and God and all of these things were trying to keep me down, I started drinking the liberal Kool-Aid and saw the way that my grandparents raised me to really be a symbol of my prior oppression. And then I had my awakening, and I realized the only thing that ever made me happy.
Because it's a radio show, I'm so sorry. We're going to be right back, and I'm going to let you complete all those thoughts. Folks, do not go away. Hey there, folks. It's the Eric Metaxas Show. I'm talking to Candace Owens. Candace, I had to interrupt you before. You were saying something so beautiful about how you were raised. Please continue.
Yeah, I mean, I was just saying that then I obviously went through a phase where I accepted the dogma of the education system and believed that those conservative beliefs, believed that my upbringing on the Bible and all of those things that my grandparents taught me was a sign of being oppressed, and then went a very liberal route and was absolutely miserable. And I woke up one day and had to make a decision, and it was really inspired by my grandmother's untimely death, all she ever wanted to do and to see was us happy. And I woke up one day and made a decision that I wanted to be what I was raised to be. And I chose conservatism, and my whole life changed and everything got better. And I realized that these values and these beliefs, and there is difference between right and wrong. And what we're fighting right now are traditional conservative values that are raised in the home versus this liberal secular values that happen outside of the home. And these two concepts at war break down in a lot of ways, but it also transpires the argument between liberty and versus tyranny, and it's all related to one another. And I wanted to be a voice for so many people that were like me.
Okay, so now your new book, it's called Blackout?
Correct.
And you're telling me that it is available. People can buy it now.
Yes, they can buy it, and it was supposed to come out this week, but because of coronavirus, everybody's books got pushed because you can't promote a book and go on a media tour when you can't go into the airport. So we're hoping that it will be able to come out once everybody's schedule is sliding. Right now, they're hoping end of August, but it really depends on when we get back to work. And I hope it comes out. I'm actually adding a chapter to it because I have so much time right now.
That's a good thing.
The chapter is called On Faith.
On faith, yeah, kind of important. I never understood the connection between faith and freedom until a few years ago, and I wrote about it in my book, If You Can Keep It. But I realized, like, nobody really understands this. The global elites don't talk about this. They don't understand all the principles that you and I have come to understand, and you get so passionate about them. I want to talk about No Safe Spaces because my friend Dennis Prager put together this incredible film, and it has been effectively deplatformed. Amazon Prime and Netflix refused to carry it, which is insane. But you are in the film. Tell us about it.
Yeah, you know, for my portion in the film, there's a lot of people that are in it. It was just taking people on the journey of what it's like to go onto a college campus. And people think that these college campuses are supposed to be where people experiment with ideas. And it's not. It's a brainwashing, a collective brainwashing that is taking place at levels that I think Adolf Hitler and Mao Zedong would be proud of. It's scary that you can arrive at a campus as a Black person and have a bunch of white liberals try to attack you on the basis that they think that you represent racism, right? And this is sort of the social psychological conditioning that's taking place at these totalitarian camps that are considered to be safe spaces against ideas that will make people happy and have value in their life. So it was incredible to be on, a whirlwind journey with Charlie Kirk and with Turning Point USA, and to really see up close what the school system was doing to people that are supposed to be our future leaders. Just looking at the course catalog, parents don't really understand how bad it is when kids are required to take lesbian, gay, social, environmental issues and all of these things that add up to absolutely nothing in terms of being competitive in a global economy. And so it was, my pleasure to be a part of the documentary. It was my pleasure to work with Turning Point USA, and it is still my pleasure to be able to work with Dennis Prager and Prager University.
Yeah, well, Dennis Prager and Prager University are doing a lot to change the world. Thank the Lord. I mean, it's an amazing thing to see what is happening out there. Sometimes things have to get worse before they get better, before people will wake up. And I really think that's kind of where we've been in a culture. It's why we got Donald Trump, because we had 8 years of Obama. And I think people finally understood something is very wrong. The America that was a shining light of freedom to the world is going away. And it's why I think people need to see No Safe Spaces. By the way, they can use the code SAVE25 and get 25% off. Go to nosafespaces.com. I hope folks will do that. Candace, is this your first book?
It is, and I wrote it myself. Everybody else was like, "Oh, just get a, ghostwriter like everybody else does. Put your face on it," and I just couldn't do it. I didn't even let them pick the title. I mean, the cover of the book I was even crazy about. I can be quite a tough creative in terms of wanting things to really be me, and I think that people that have followed me and gotten me to this point, they know my voice, they know my ideas, and anything else would just be fraudulent to just slap my face on a book and say buy it. So it has been a labor of love. I don't know that I will ever do it again. It's been very difficult, but Simon & Schuster has been wonderful. My publisher has been wonderful, and they've allowed me to be the creative crazy that I am and push back and fight with them the whole time. So
wow, I love that. I think in order to sell books next time, I'm going to demand that your face is on my book.
Yeah.
I'm going to make that decision. Obviously, I write books. Writing about oneself, which I have just done, is harder than writing about anything. I think there's just something about it to be objective when you're writing about something that's inherently subjective. It's weird. But so you talk about your life story and you talk about your ideas in the book, correct?
Right. Yeah. So I just wanted to give people the background of who I am, because I haven't really spoken much about my personal life. So that's sort of in the beginning. And then we sort of go into how just really my personal life, which is largely anecdotal, sort of transformed me into realizing things that are not anecdotal and that are factual and are things that you can research. And again, they'll see a lot of the ideas that have been espoused by some of the greatest Black thinkers alive. And because I do consider them to be my professors, just reading their books, I learned more reading Thomas Sowell books and Walter Williams books and Shelby Steele books than I learned throughout my entire public education system and college. And that's sad, but it's true. And I hope that I can give to people the gift that they gave to me.
Well, that's so wonderful. Also, what's interesting to me, which I've rarely talked about, but what I find interesting demographically and why I think the Democratic Party is really scared is that most Blacks in America are either seriously Christian or culturally Christian, so that they basically get stuff that the Democrats have chosen over the last couple of decades to ignore. So the Democrats treat Blacks like, we know you've got your vote and we're not going to do anything for you. I think the Republicans treated white evangelicals exactly that way. Like, where are you going to go? You're not going to vote for the socialists and stuff. And so we're seeing a huge shift right now. And I think because of voices like yours, and obviously I mentioned Kanye, there are more and more people willing to say what needs to be said. Even the subtitle. Tell us the subtitle of your book again.
How Black America Can Make Its Second Escape from the Democrat Plantations.
Wow. That's just an amazing... It's an amazing subtitle. Blackout. Say it again. How
Black America Can Make Its Second Escape from the Democrat Plantations.
All right. Well, first of all, you're telling me this book is available today. So
yes.
Today, people are going to watch this video. They're going to hear us. They're going to go, I guess, wherever they go, to Barnes & Noble or Amazon.com or wherever fine tobacco products are sold, and they're going to buy this book. And when this lunacy is over, I want to make sure that we get you in the studio and promote this book more, because I really do think it's vital that more people are open to hearing the truth, because what you're telling us is the truth. I mean, was there any level at which you were shocked when you began to discover this history that you write about?
Absolutely. I mean, any person that was a Black liberal their whole lives and then suddenly changed to a Black conservative goes through a period of cognitive dissonance, and you believe you're either going crazy, which I thought I was legitimately going crazy, that everyone who I thought were racist and Republicans and all of this stuff actually had your best interests at heart, and wanted to give you a fair chance in society. It's hard to hold on to your sanity when you go through it. And then that after you think you're going crazy, you develop this rage and you're angry, and you just kind of want to blow fire on everything. I always say I don't just want to leave the plantation, I want to burn it down. And then you sort of get into a different space where you go through all those stages of grief, and then you accept it. And that's where I'm at now, where I've accepted the condition that we're in, and I'm willing to go out and to have and to promote these ideas and to hope that I can bring more Black people into this light, because what it is, it's really a light. It's a dark tunnel, and then suddenly you're in a light. And I talk about that and Plato's allegory of the cave in my book a bit too. And really the reaction once you're come out of a cave is like, no, sunlight. I want to go back in the cave. You want to retreat because it's safe. You're comfortable with the darkness, but the light is the light.
Well, speaking of light, I'm glad that your Christian faith is important to you. The reason I say it is that I bumped into a lot of firebrand conservatives who don't have a strong faith, and I want to say to them, you're going to need to lean on Jesus because you will be persecuted. You will go through trials. If you don't lean on God and know where your strength comes from, know where your courage comes from, know where truth comes from, you risk, going down, and we've seen that happen. So I just want to thank God that He has given you that kind of a faith, so that you know where all this good stuff comes from. It kills me to be out of time. Candace Owens, God bless you. We will continue the conversation. The book is Blackout. I hope a lot of people get a copy. And to be continued, we will catch you when this bunker stuff is over. Thanks again.
Thank you so much.